Welcome back to the All Ball Podcast, where it's all ball all the time. You are here with your hosts Isaiah and Sean. Today is episode number 6. Isaiah, how you feeling today, man? What's your thoughts about what very little is going on around the league today?
All right, since much isn't going on around the league right now, I thought that I'd discuss just a general basketball topic. And seeing as we are Clutch City, I feel like we should talk about what it really means to be clutch. Because as I mentioned a few episodes ago, I feel like clutch is a misunderstood concept. A lot of people think of it as, oh, if you can hit this shot at the end of the game, then that's clutch, and that's just all that clutch is. And there's a lot more nuance to it that I think people don't understand.
Yeah, I think when you think of clutch, a lot of people only see it on one side of the ball. You know, looking back to so many games that even like in the bubble when James Harden blocked Lou Dort,
Hmm.
you could be clutch on the defensive side of the ball too. And I think, I think clutch is even within like the last 2 minutes of the game. And um, I think just shot selection itself is also factored into how clutch, like what kind of shot you're taking. Not only like if you make the shot or not,
Hmm.
but I think factoring in what kind of shot, like you're taking smart shots or not.
Exactly. And then another thing about it, I do agree about defense, because that's one of the things that I was going to get into. But the other part of being clutch that I think people underrate a lot is the offensive side that isn't shooting. So people who can get to the rim when it matters, or people who can draw attention and then make the right pass. And most notably for both of those are Giannis and LeBron, who get completely left out of clutch arguments a lot, or not left out, or get disrespected in most clutch arguments
Hmm.
because people see them as non-shooters for the most part, while LeBron has improved in that area. But generally speaking, they see them as non-shooters, so they have their value as clutch players significantly lower. And like you were saying, we we saw Giannis have two of the most clutch defensive plays in the history of the finals in his very first final series. Not to mention, he had a clutch dunk by calling for an alley oop and still converting it after being pushed. So I just feel like people should look more at what kind of shots people are getting and what other moves besides jump shots people are making in clutch time to get the most effective use out of their possessions in this critical time.
So I want to ask you if, there's 5 seconds left on the clock. Any guy in NBA history, which guy are you picking and why?
Well, I need some more factors in that, because
Uh, okay,
if the
so
score is tied, are we down by one? Are we down by two?
let's go. Let's go down by one,
Okay.
and I guess go ahead and give your player for both sides of the ball on offense and defense.
Okay, so if I had to choose my player, if we're down by one, then really I don't see myself going wrong with anybody from. Ooh, but if we're down by one, okay. All right, I'm gonna take free throws into account for this one. So I was going to say that anybody like Giannis, LeBron, or Shaq, but because
Okay.
free throws could play a factor, I can't use them.
Hmm.
So in that case, I mean, I'm gonna have to default to, the typical guys Jordan, Kobe. I don't know if I'd go for Dame Lillard just because I feel like he's just too prone to going for the 3-point shot to
Mhm.
win games, even though we wouldn't need it in this scenario at all.
Yeah. And as for the defensive side,
Yeah, and as for defense, it more so depends on what team we're going against
hmm
because if the best player on the other team is a point guard, then I mean I'm not gonna pick like Hakeem or somebody to get
yeah,
a
exactly.
defensive stop for the win. But at the same time, if the best player on the other team is like Shaq or Giannis, I'm not gonna pick Marcus Smart as my defensive guy.
Yeah.
So I'd say just generally speaking, I'm gonna do guard, wing, and big man. So if it's a guard, again, I'd probably go with Jordan just because he's one of the few guards to ever win Defensive Player of the Year. That's pretty important. Then for wing players, probably go with Kawhi, another Defensive Player of the Year. He's
hmm
most notable for stopping, or not necessarily stopping, but slowing down LeBron very early in his career to win a finals MVP. So I'd probably go with not necessarily current Kawhi, but maybe Toronto Kawhi or earlier. Yeah, I could see that being my pick if it's a wing player that needs to be guarded. And then if it's a big, then like I said before, maybe Hakeem. If it's a stretch big, then there could be some issues with that. But assuming it's a traditional big, then I'd take Hakeem as my pick.
hmm Well, as for me, on the offensive side of the ball, I have to go Kobe.
Hmm.
I I don't think there's you pass up on a guy who walks by an opposing team's bench and says, "You left too much time for me." That's so like cold-blooded, bro. Like, how do you say that? And that's like so much confidence. I want the guy that's gonna have like all the confidence in the world and say that he's gonna make it. And
Hmm.
just looking back at how clutch Kobe was over all the years of his career, it's really hard to pass on him.
And I mean, if you also look at him, this is a man who made his career off hitting contested shots.
hmm
So even outside of the clutch moments, that that skill is going to transfer over into the clutch.
Yeah, and I mean, knowing how good Kobe was at the mid-range game, if we're only down by one, all we need him to do is just hit a two.
Exactly.
So if he gets into his spot that he really wants, or like you said, being contested all his career, taking all those shots, I'm very confident that he would be able to hit that shot.
Hmm.
As for defensive side of the ball, I'm only gonna pick one guy, and I'm thinking about it as who would be able to guard the most positions, but with size.
Hmm.
And the person obviously that first comes to mind has to be Giannis.
Okay. Hmm.
I think Giannis just is such a very good multi-positional defender. Maybe against like Shaq or something. I mean, he might get bullied.
Hmm.
Because Shaq is just
Yeah,
different in the
Shaq
post.
is a different beast altogether.
Yeah, and but I mean, I think he could guard almost every guard out there
Hmm.
and almost every center. Obviously, like I said, Shaq, who's probably stronger than him in his prime.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think those would be my two picks: Kobe and Giannis.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. I really, really wanted to pick Giannis, but the more I thought about it, he is a very good perimeter defender, good against guards, good against bigs, good against that mid area of wings and weaker post guys. But at the same time, As much as I am a Giannis fan, I must admit that faster guards are a problem for him just because his legs and such are so long.
Mhm.
So that's a problem. And then, like you were pointing out, it will also be a problem if it's someone like Shaq on the other side who's just a beast. And no matter how much of a freak Giannis is, he can't control Shaq.
Right.
Yeah, so that's why I felt like I had to break it into the categories. And staying with those categories, Giannis would definitely be either right there with Kawhi or right behind Kawhi for my mid area pick.
Mhm. Yeah, because even as gifted as Giannis is athletically, compared to Shaq, uh, I mean, you just think of Shaq just, tearing down the backboard and, just absolutely bullying people, even, bigs in their prime back in the day. I mean, I don't know if Giannis holds up against a guy like that.
Exactly.
Well, speaking of bigs, let's go ahead and move on to our next topic of Joel Embiid versus Anthony Davis. Uh, Isaiah, who do you got in that debate?
Well, one key thing to note here is that we are specifically talking about when healthy for the two of these guys.
Yeah.
Because if anyone can recall my top 25 list, I personally had AD over Embiid. And
Hmm.
that's simply because while AD is made of glass, Joel Embiid is made of paper. At least AD can withstand some water, some wind. Yeah, no. Embiid, he's he's guaranteed to miss significant games every season. So taking health out of the equation, just who is simply the better player when just they're at their full health, playing their best, and that is where my pick personally goes to Joel Embiid.
Okay.
He's stronger and more dominant. He is a better shooter. The numbers prove that. He's somewhat comparable defensively. Some people will argue he's better. Some people argue he's worse. So I'm just going to go with the middle ground and say he's comparable defensively. And then at the same time, Joel Embiid is a proven leader. Joel Embiid has proven that with a Ben Simmons who's scared of offense and many other just average role playing guys, he can at least lead his team to the playoffs. And even in the bubble, not this past season, but the season before, obviously,
Hmm.
Ben Simmons wasn't playing, and he still was able to at least get his team into the playoffs. Well, not like they were going to be out of the playoffs, but he was able to will his team and lead his team, even though they were a first round exit. Joel Embiid, I just feel like what he does is more conducive to winning, and it's just more dominant than AD is at the moment, at least.
Yeah, for AD, I've always thought his shooting abilities were very overrated, especially his three-point shooting ability.
Hmm.
Um, at the moment, I'm trusting Joel Embiid to take a three before I trust AD. And
Absolutely.
especially with the game changing or evolving to where bigs kind of have to shoot the three to kind of get any kind of playing time. I mean, you look at guys like Andre Drummond, DeAndre Jordan; these guys aren't playing anymore that much.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm taking Joel Embiid too. I was kind of scared. I thought you were about to say you were going to take Anthony Davis. And I mean, obviously, recounting back to my top 25 list too, I also had Joel Embiid above Anthony Davis. Uh, um, I know it's not really much of a skill, but like I said, also on my top 25, that Anthony Davis doesn't want to play his role.
Hmm.
I'm not taking too much. Uh, I'm not taking that too much into account right now, just because I'm kind of want to base this more off of skill.
Hmm.
But it's just sitting in the back of my head, and I can't. Every time I think of AD, I think of a guy that just does not want to play his role.
Hmm.
And, I don't think Anthony Davis has the perimeter defense or ability to even guard a four type player. Um, and I think of Embiid. Embiid's not that great of a perimeter defender either, but I think he could hold his own for the most part.
Hmm.
And, AD, he blocks shots. He's a decent, pretty good shot blocker, but I still think I'd take Embiid. Like you said, he's stronger,
Hmm.
and I think he's willing to get down in the post and do more of that dirty work than Anthony Davis is.
Exactly. And that's what I was saying about him being more dominant.
hmm So out of these two, okay, well, I mean, Anthony Davis already won a ring,
Hmm.
but out of these two, which, oh, I mean, that's kind of not a realistic question because the Lakers are ahead of the 76ers. I was gonna ask which of these two guys do you see winning a ring next? Again, well, I mean, for Anthony Davis again, but
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the Lakers are
And
right
it's,
there.
yeah, it's really not a fair comparison. And it's why I really hated the way people were comparing AD to Giannis before this past season.
hmm
And it's like, you can't compare a player who was unsuccessful as a leader to players who are trying to lead teams to success and are
hmm
we're doing significantly better than he did as a leader. So even though he won, it's because he had LeBron to take that heavy brunt of the work and the leadership and just creating space and attention. Whereas Embiid and Giannis are both the focal points of their
hmm
teams. So really, I think the way you could have framed this question was, who do I see winning a ring first? AD as a leader of a team or Embiid as the leader of a team?
hmm
And in that case, I really see Embiid because
hmm
what's been holding Embiid back from going further is Ben Simmons, with the
Right.
exception of the 1 year where they were almost in the conference finals and then a Kawhi bounce just ruined their whole season.
hmm
So I think give Joel Embiid somebody not of LeBron's caliber, obviously, because the point of this question is them as a leader, but just
Right.
give him a really high quality offensive star, and Joel Embiid could easily be in title contention.
Right. So, so here's how I'm gonna frame the next question.
Hmm.
Let's say we turn back the time, and both of these guys are in the same draft class. Which
Hmm.
guy are you drafting?
Okay, assuming we're taking health out of it like we have been for this whole thing, then
Right.
absolutely taking Embiid.
hmm
One, just because, like I said, I trust him more as the leader of a team, the best player on a team.
hmm
And then also, like I said, I feel like he's more dominant. Whereas with AD, I don't know. I feel like even if I did construct a team around him, sometime his aggressiveness just isn't there.
hmm
And I don't want to necessarily have that as the focal point of my team because he's not much of a leader personality either.
Right.
So yeah, I'd definitely take Embiid if I were drafting them in the same year.
So I think we could both agree that also that Pelicans Anthony Davis is better than Lakers Anthony Davis.
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
So if we're comparing Pelicans Anthony Davis to Joel Embiid, are you changing your mind there, or are you staying the same?
I'm staying the same because for the most part,
hmm
everything that I said is still true.
Right.
Embiid is more consistently aggressive, Embiid is still the better shooter there. Defensively, they're still comparable there. The
Mhm.
only thing is that AD did have a lot more games where he would go off when he was on the Pelicans. So
Mhm.
there's that. But for the most part, I still just cannot put AD over Embiid at any point.
So besides these two, oh, well, I guess okay. I, I was excluding Jokic.
Hmm.
Besides these two, which is the next best center in the league?
Besides these two,
Yeah, and then excluding Jokic.
excluding Jokic, because obviously we have
Yeah,
Jokic one.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, based off the way my top 25 went, my answer would be Rudy Gobert.
Hmm.
But that's because Carl Anthony Towns can't stay healthy.
Yeah.
So if we're just giving everybody that benefit of health,
Hmm.
then Carl Anthony Towns will probably be my number three. Well, technically this would be four since we're including AD in here. He'd be my number four guy right after these three.
Hmm. The first guy that popped into my head was Bam, but
Hmm.
I completely forgot about Karl Anthony Towns. So I'm gonna go ahead and go with you and say Karl Anthony Towns. But I think Bam also has a pretty good case to be up there.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Bam is one of those guys who is like right on the cusp of my
Hmm.
top 25
Hmm.
because he has so many skills. He's a surprisingly good playmaker, very versatile defensively. The only thing really lacking is his offensive game in terms of scoring the ball outside of that painted area. And then even then, he's not as aggressive in scoring in the paint as guys like Giannis or LeBron or anything. So that's
Hmm.
another reason why he's kind of lower down. But yeah, Bam is somebody he's right after everybody that I said in terms of my centers.
So the last question I want to ask you is, in today's league, is it more valuable to have elite center such as Joel Embiid, Anthony Davis, or Jokic, or is it more valuable to have an elite point guard slash wing?
You see, basketball is a team sport, so this is a hard question because it's all about what your roster construction is.
Hmm.
But if I really had to think about it, I'd say that the answer goes to point guard and wing. If we just look at the general layout of who has won the championships throughout
Hmm.
these past seasons, it's always been, oh, Giannis this past season, who, while he played more like a big, still mostly a wing guy in terms of the way he likes to drive and slash.
Right.
Then we have the Lakers, LeBron, a wing guy. Before that, it was the Raptors, Kawhi, a wing guy. Then we have the Warriors, Steph and KD, LeBron again in there. Steph just clearly this is a guard and wing dominated league.
Yeah, I think as long as you have a center who can rebound very efficiently and play good interior defense, I think that's all you can really ask for. If you have an elite, you know, guard or wing, I think that a big man who's an elite big man who could be very valuable, but I think they're also limited in their roles at times.
Hmm.
But all right, you want to go ahead and move on to the hot takes?
Yeah. So I'll start with mine.
All right.
This is a very controversial statement, but I
Okay.
feel like it needs to be said. Bill Russell is an overrated all time player.
Ooh, okay.
Now, I will not deny the importance of his impact on the game and just society as a whole. And I will not deny that for his era, he was by far the most dominant, like, success player in his era. Because obviously you have Wilt, who was in his era, who is more dominant just as an individual player.
Hmm.
But when we talk about all time rankings, when we look at people like Kobe, LeBron, Jordan, everybody ranks them. And oh, what is his advanced plus minus when he's on and off the court? What's his what's his win shares? What the,
Yeah.
like, people have to pull up every single advanced stat. How many burgers did they eat before games?
Hmm.
Just people dig up every little thing to make valid cases for guys who played in the 90s and up to now. But
Yeah.
then for guys before that, they just kind of get a you played in a older time pass. So you're just up there because you've always been up there. And I don't necessarily think that that's fair to the more recent players who have to get nitpicked so specifically, where someone like Bill Russell and Will, it's just, oh, well, you were doing crazy stuff in your time, so you're up here by legacy, and that's about it.
You know what? I'm gonna have to push back on your statement because I don't think it's fair just because the game wasn't evolved to the way it is now.
Hmm.
Um, it's hard to argue against 11 rings. I mean, obviously there was not much talent in the league back then, but when we look at the arguments of who's the best player in the league or who's the GOAT, what's one of the things a lot of people bring up? Championships.
Hmm.
And like I said, I think it's kind of hard to argue with 11 of them, but I just don't think it's fair to take away what he did back then just because he can't do what's happening now in the league because the league obviously was not what it was back then, what it like how it is now.
You see, I don't know. I know that rings are one of the main factors in ranking players all time.
Hmm.
But if we look at it, the Celtics were by far the best team of that era, and that's why they kept winning. And then also, not only was there less talent, but the league was smaller. So that was less fatigue, less likely to get injured. And there were a lot of factors that made winning all of those rings just unfairly easy for the Celtics over other teams.
So, oh man, it's because I don't want to discredit what he did back in the league just because of, the circumstances of what was happening at that time. Like, obviously,
Yeah.
there was no 3 point,
But I mean,
no, not even 3 point line.
that's the thing. I'm not trying to discredit it. I'm
Hmm.
just trying to say that it is drastically overvalued by a lot of people.
So is he even in your top 10 all time?
I don't necessarily have that just fully laid out, but just off the top of my head, I'd say he's fringe top 10, so he comes in at 10 at
Mm-hmm.
best, but I'd put him more like 10 to 17-ish range.
Hmm.
And because people don't seem to give the same excuse of, oh, well, the league wasn't what it is today for people like Jordan when comparing him to LeBron. And there are so many more benefits to playing in the league today versus back then.
Yeah.
So I feel like if people don't really like to give those benefits to Jordan, then they shouldn't be given to anybody from previous times.
So you know what? I want to make one more statement. I know you said that they didn't play as many games back then or have as many teams, so there's no less injury risk.
Hmm.
I believe that's what you said, right?
Hmm.
Well, I could also make the statement that they didn't have the technology back then, that they do now to even keep these athletes, up and healthy the way they do now. Like, back then they were hooping in what, Converse, these flat-footed shoes, and they don't have all this cryotherapy and these expert massage therapists and all that to, that I don't even think they had Gatorade back then, so I think there's an argument for both sides. I mean, I can kind of see where you're coming from, but I don't know. To say it's like heavily overrated kind of feels disrespectful, but I can still see where you're coming from.
I mean, now let me clarify that this stems from, I believe it was Charles Barkley's top
Hmm.
10 all time, and he had Bill Russell in his top three, I think. And
Hmm.
that's part of where this came from. But when I also really looked at it, I don't know. I feel like even having Bill Russell in the upper half of the top 10 at all, because I've seen some people who have him at 4 and 5 and think that that's perfectly fine. So I feel like even having him up there is still too high.
Yeah. We're gonna have to make a top 10, top maybe top 15 list all time.
Whew, oh man, that's gonna be a controversial one.
Yeah, I think that's gonna be a lot harder to agree with than our top 25.
Yeah, but
But
let's move on to your hot take.
all right, my hot take is I believe that Tyler Herro's gonna go back to bubble playoff Tyler Herro this season.
So you think it was more of a sophomore slump type of thing?
Yes, yes. I think that he got a lot of hype coming into that sophomore season. I think he tried to like live up to it too much. Kind of live like in that glory.
Hmm.
He was in songs. He was in. He was a pretty
So
big
you
household name
think
at
that
first.
it blew up his ego too much?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Okay.
thinking. You know, I I think he goes back. He averaged what, like 15, 16 points this past season, but I don't think it was on like very good efficiency. I know he wasn't having a great well,
Hmm.
I mean, I'm looking at his stats right now. He didn't shoot the three ball that well, but his field goal percentage was better than last year.
Okay.
Um, but especially in the playoffs this year, he was
Yeah.
terrible. He averaged 9 points and only 31% from the field.
Okay.
So,
So my opinion on that is that it depends. Because one reason why I think that he struggled more this
mhm,
year was because teams were more knowledgeable of him and were actually having him on the scouting report this
mm,
season a lot more. So teams were more equipped to guard him.
mhm.
And he likely was just so caught up in his first season success that he didn't grind as hard to get significantly better in the off season. So when it came time where teams were prepared for his play style, he just probably didn't put in enough work to be able to overcome that preparation that they have. But
So,
at
oh,
the
go ahead.
same time, the Heat have drastically improved with the addition of Kyle Lowry. I know he's old, but this man is a very smart player. So with him there, Victor Oladipo still there, and he'll be coming back. I feel like the Heat have a lot of pieces that are going to command a lot of attention from defenses. So that should be his opportunity to step up again and
Hmm.
really just go back to his old way. So I say that it depends, but I more agree with you than disagree.
So I'm glad you brought up the Kyle Lowry edition. I think Kyle Lowry is actually going to help Tyler Hero because I think Tyler Hero was kind of put it into a playmaking, like he was trying to, he were trying to force him to be a playmaking player
Mm-hmm.
last year because I mean, who was their starting guard? Uh, was it Dragic?
Dragic, yeah.
See, now Dragic's gone. Well, I mean, I think they try to have Tyler Hero be too much of a playmaker. And I think, Kyle Lowry being a pretty great playmaker, he'll be able to take some of that load off of Herro.
Mm-hmm.
I think Herro could go more to that off ball style of play. I mean, obviously not like Duncan Robinson, but
Mm-hmm.
I just think that with the ball less in his hands, I think he'll be able to do more when he actually does get the ball.
You see, but that's another thing. I feel like when he was playing at his best, he
Hmm.
had the ball in his hands a lot. He just wasn't playmaking.
Hmm.
Like he was just trying to get his own shot. And so getting that rhythm was really when he was at his best. And he's not going to have as many opportunities to do that if he can't just absolutely show out at the start of the season.
So, is he starting? Who's their starting shooting guard at the moment?
I
'Cause
think they'll probably start Robinson, especially because they just dropped a pretty big paycheck on him.
Yeah, it's true. So it either be Lowry, Robinson, or Hero, and then obviously
Butler,
Jimmy,
yeah.
and then who's gonna be their four?
I'm not sure. Who do
They
they
lost
have?
Iguodala.
Yeah, they lost Iguodala.
They lost Ariza.
Oh, yeah, they did lose Ariza.
Well, I mean, Bam's obviously starting at the five.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter who's at the four. That doesn't really affect this Duncan Robinson and Hero starting spot. So.
Right. I was just trying to see like what they're gonna maybe need more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if they're starting at the four, maybe they have a stretch four who's maybe they don't need to start Robinson right away for his 3-point shooting ability. I mean, Hero's not that bad of he's not that much worse than Robinson, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm picking Robinson at the 3-point contest.
Absolutely. But then at the same time, it's the NBA we're talking about. You can never have too much shooting on the floor.
Right.
And then with that, you also have both Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler, who both can play make. Where Kyle
Mhm.
Lowry, it's more like his main thing, but Jimmy Butler, it's something he's just very capable of. But in no matter, they're both respectable playmakers. So it really doesn't matter if they have a stretch four or not. Duncan Robinson will be the more valuable starter.
So for this season, I'm looking back at his totals from last season. His averaged 15, 3.5 for assists, and then for rebounds he averaged 5, which is kind of surprising.
Hmm.
Um, I think the season, if I'm projecting him to play like how he did, I think he could average 18, 3, and 4. 18 points, 3 assists, and 4 rebounds. I think that his field goal efficiency probably stays the same, around 42, 43%.
Hmm.
But I think his 3-point efficiency goes up. I think he might get into the 40s. He's never been a 40% 3-point shooter. He's always been
Hmm.
right below it. But I think this year he could finally step up with his efficiency.
Okay, I do agree with that part. I do think his 3-point efficiency will go up,
Hmm.
but I'm not exactly sure about him going up to an 18, nearly 20 point per game scorer, just
Mm-hmm.
because you have Jimmy, who's obviously going to be their primary scorer at all times if he stays healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Duncan Robinson is somebody who I believe can and not can, but who will and should get more minutes than Tyler Herro.
Mm.
Bam, he's no slouch scoring the ball. So he's going to have to get his shots up. Kyle Lowry, he's going to have to still score so teams will respect his scoring ability to open up playmaking opportunities. So
Mm-hmm.
that's already 4 people who will need to score. So I just feel like with all of that happening, Herro just won't have the same opportunities unless he just all of a sudden becomes blazing efficient from behind the arc.
See, the only reason I think this can happen is because I think the Heat are such a score by committee team. I don't see a
Mhm.
single 20-point score on there. I mean, unless, maybe Jimmy can, but I
Mhm.
still think Jimmy averages around, 18.
Well, I mean, Jimmy, he's nearly 20. I think Duncan Robinson, if he starts consistently, he should be around 15 maybe or something, just
Mm-hmm.
depending on how many opportunities they give him. Bam should be somewhere in the mid to high teens. Kyle Lowry might take a bit of a step back, but he should still be in the teens without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, that just leaves Herro. So, like I said, it just depends on how many opportunities the team decides to give him.
Yeah, I mean, well, I know you said Oladipo earlier. I don't think Oladipo, to be honest, I don't think Oladipo even averages like 12 points. I think he's
Oh,
below 12 points.
oh.
I just don't think he has it anymore, man. I mean, he's
You
been through
see,
a lot of injuries.
that's the problem. It's not that he doesn't have it. His problem is that he just can't stay healthy. When he plays, he's definitely proven that he can still be a scoring threat. Now, his efficiency hasn't been what it used to be all
Mm-hmm.
the time, but he has definitely still shown scoring ability. So I
Mm-hmm.
just feel like if this season, when he comes back, he can prove that he can stay healthy, I think he's absolutely in that mix for mid to high teen scoring.
Nah, I can't see that happening. I think he's below 14 or below 13 or 12. Because, I mean, there's, like I said, it's scored by committee, but at the same time, you do have a lot of guys that could score. Like you said, Lowry, uh, Jimmy, Bam, Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson. That's already 5 guys. Yeah, like I said, I don't see him getting over like 14 points a game, max 14.
All right. I mean, I don't know. I can't agree with that unless he just doesn't stay healthy.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, do you have anything else to say about this topic here?
No, that's all I have on this.
All right. Well, that's gonna go ahead and be the end of the podcast. If you like the podcast, go ahead and like and subscribe. Drop a comment down below. Isaiah, you got any last comments?
Share it with your friends. Let us know in the comments if you enjoyed. Don't forget, like, subscribe, and also we now have an All Ball Podcast Instagram page at All Ball Podcast YT. So don't forget to follow that as well for just updates on when episodes are coming out and also opportunities to sort of interact with the podcast.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead and follow that Instagram for a lot of, updates, like you said. Oh yeah, one last thing before we go. Want to give a huge shout out to my amazing co-host here. His birthday's in a couple days, so go ahead and wish him a happy birthday. But yeah, that's gonna be the end of the podcast. So we'll go ahead and catch you in the next one. Later.